The old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, Virginia, was a blessing to my family when we moved in. We had always had difficulty finding a home that was both inexpensive and large enough to accommodate our large family. There would frequently be 3 of us in a room. When my mother signed the contract, she sobbed. For the first time in my life, I would have my own room in a house that needed a lot of work. It was easy to overlook the deteriorating laminate floor in the kitchen or the obstinate uncleanable stains in the bathtub. We had the entire antique decrepit farmhouse to ourselves, surrounded by nothing but grass. The rest of my family and I were overjoyed, and I'd never seen my parents so overjoyed before. Until we spotted the old camcorder, we didn't suspect anything was amiss in the house. My sister Kathy and I were attempting to declutter the dusty attic by moving boxes up there. A camcorder sat in the middle of a little table covered in a sheet. As a result, we saw the videotape. Afterwards, we re-watched the film. The individual who was on the recording didn't make any sense at all. When we showed my parents the footage from the camera, we looked at their expressions as they watched it. They appeared to be as perplexed as I was, but they tried to offer an answer. It's possible he was making a movie or just joking around. That, or he was just plain nuts. When they said it, I was sure that they didn't believe it either. After seeing that video, nothing felt regular anymore. There was a haunting quality to the house's creaks and drippings. I couldn't stop hearing the man's voice. Is this the house? Can she? I'm not sure how to tell, You will never be able to leave this house or her. Once you've been twisted and turned by it, she'll arrive. Don't stare at her directly at all costs. It happened on the same night when my parents shot themselves in the head and killed themselves. My parents walked out on us while we were watching a movie and went to their room, where they cut their own necks with a kitchen knife. That, of course, was the starting point for me. We weren't the only ones in the living room anymore. 5 people had joined us, their backs turned to us and their faces pressed into the wall, as if they were hiding from us. After a brief pause, I snatched my youngest sibling and another from behind and hurried them up the stairwell. We had to squeeze past a man who was facing the wall approximately halfway up the stairwell before we could meet 4 other individuals in the corridor. I walked my siblings past 2 of the people and opened my parents' door, eager to welcome them in. In the face of my parents' gory corpses and 2 individuals facing the wall, I twisted around to try to keep the children from witnessing. Please, everyone, proceed to my room. Shutting the door behind me, I muttered something under my breath. Thankfully, my bedroom was unoccupied when we slid past the other person. Inquiry, what is going on? When my younger sister Sammy started crying, I cradled her in my arms and gave her a kiss. If I could just figure it out right now, Bug, I would. Not to be alarmed. Following the release of my sister, I made eye contact with each of my siblings before announcing to them, I'll be right back. Understand that you must not leave this place at any cost? Okay, good, I finally murmured after patiently awaiting their nods. Kathy, you've got the job now. Having said that, I left my bedroom and shut the door behind me. 3 fresh faces had come in the corridor in the brief time that I had been in the room. They stood still in front of the wall, just like the others. 2 of them stood out, though, because I had seen them before. My parents were to blame. Mom? What's going on here exactly? What on earth are you up to? As I made my way down the corridor, I let out a yell. I was going to yell again as I made my way back to the stairwell when I heard someone say, "Shh. She'll be here soon. No matter what, don't stare at her." The woman behind me hadn't even turned her head towards me when I turned to look at her. Who? She didn't respond when I asked. If I looked at her, what would happen? Silence. The hallway's temperature plummeted very immediately, as if the air had been sucked out of it. That's when the silence became deafening. I had no choice except to turn around and face the wall, which was the only thing I could do. One of the last things I noticed before entering the hallway was a woman, and she took my breath away. She was stunning, with long red locks falling from her shoulders and a peculiar radiance emanating from her. I couldn't hear her footsteps at all, like if she were floating. She veered to the right and headed straight for my parents' house. In spite of the fact that there was no sound, I watched her kiss my mother and then my father. My parents had vanished. Although I desperately wanted to scream and demand to know where they had gone, I couldn't bring myself to do so. Just as the tears started to gather, she floated towards me. As I buried my forehead on the wall, I closed my eyes and covered them with my palms. Just a split second later, I felt her looming over me. It made me flinch as she stroked her hand up one of my arms and down the other. When I heard her speak, I tightened my grip on the hands covering my eyes even more. Her voice was mellow, relaxing, and reassuring to the point where I felt as though a blanket had been draped over my entire body. "Are you sure you don't want to see me?" she inquired. "Yes, I do, with all of my heart." "No," I shook my head. "Don't worry. Turn around and take a look at me." Then she said, and I closed my eyes. "Your parents will return to you. I can do this. You only have to turn around and look at me." I'm not sure why I kept refusing to turn around and look at her when every fiber of my being wanted to do so. In fact, I didn't do it. "Will you turn around and face me now?" My entire body stiffened as she yelled right into my ear. It seemed like an eternity before I heard a peculiar sloshing noise downstairs, so I closed my eyes and waited. I cautiously opened my eyes and surveyed the hallway, which was now completely deserted. The sound of sloshing water remained, traveling from room to room on the ground floor. When I returned to my room, I was shocked to see my siblings cowering together in fear. In her haste to get into my arms, Kathy nearly dropped the youngest, who had somehow fallen asleep in her arms. Leaving the room, I shook their hands and hushed them. So close that I could feel their feet pressing against mine. A man with wild eyes was tilting a can of gasoline on the floor as we made our way down the stairs. I recognized him as the man in the video. They must be removed. They have no choice but to leave now. Her actions are out of control. As he made his way up the steps, he murmured something to himself. As if I hadn't noticed her, I should have. As the dad screamed and sobbed behind us, I hurried the kids out the front door and down the stairs and across the living room. My siblings and I sat in the grass and watched as our dream house burned to the ground from a safe distance. I missed him leaving the house since I wasn't there when he did. Even now, I have no idea what happened on that fateful day, and I have no explanation for the death of my parents. I have no idea why I'm even bothering to write about this right now. Close your eyes and avoid looking straight at her if you see them facing the wall in your home.